The Woods Behind Sweat. November 21st, 1996 was the night when the lie became reality. Henry always loved to tell stories. He had a knack for spinning tall tales that sent chills down his friends' spines, and his latest one was no exception. There was an old, run-down gas station just outside of town called Sweat's. It had been abandoned for years, sitting on the edge of a thick, untamed forest. Henry, with a sly grin, told John, Chase, and Owen about a creature that lived in those woods, a mangled human deer man with antlers sprouting from its head, twisted limbs, and a craving for flesh. The first time he lied, they laughed it off. The second time, he made the details even more grotesque. By the third time, Henry could see fear creeping into their eyes. His family, too, had heard the story 4 times to be exact, but they brushed it off as teenage nonsense. It was all in good fun, just a joke to scare people. Or so Henry thought. On the night of November 21, Henry lay in his bed, the wind howling outside his window. His friends were asleep in their homes, and the town was quiet. But Henry couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, lurking just beyond the tree line near Sweats. He tried to push the thought away after all. The human deer man was just a story. But then, a faint scraping noise echoed from the woods. Branches snapped, leaves crunched, and something heavy was moving closer. The lie had been told one too many times, and now the creature was real. John was the first to die. The next morning, his body was found torn apart in the woods, his face frozen in a look of terror. Chase and Owen thought it was a freak accident, but Henry knew better. Still, he said nothing. That night, Chase was next. The creature tracked him down in his bedroom, antlers casting shadows on the walls as it ripped through his flesh. Owen tried to run, but the mangled human deer man was always one step ahead, its twisted legs carrying it through the night like a nightmare-given form. One by one, Henry's friends were slaughtered, their screams lost in the wind. By the time the creature came for Henry, he had already seen the carnage it had left behind. The mangled human deer man stood at the foot of his bed, its antlers dripping with blood, its eyes black, empty voids staring into his soul. It didn't move. For a long, agonizing minute, the creature and Henry locked eyes. Henry's heart pounded in his chest as sweat drenched his skin. But he couldn't look away. Then, without warning, the creature reached out with a clawed hand, grabbing Henry by the throat. His vision went black. When Henry woke up, he was tied up in a dark, damp cave deep within the woods. The stench of death filled the air. He struggled against the ropes, his wrists raw from the effort, but it was no use. His mouth was gagged, muffling his frantic cries. Across the cave, in the shadows, he saw them, John, Chase, and Owen. But they were no longer his friends. Their bodies had been horribly twisted, contorted into monstrous human deer hybrids. Their faces were barely recognizable, their eyes filled with mindless hunger. The creature had turned them into replicas of itself mangled human deer men. Henry's heart sank as the reality of the situation set in. The original creature stepped forward, its antlers brushing the cave ceiling as it loomed over Henry. It made no sound, no growl, no roar. It simply watched. Henry's friends, now mindless, savage beasts, advanced toward him slowly, their jagged teeth bared. Panic surged through Henry as he thrashed against his bonds, but there was no escape. John, or whatever was left of him, was the first to bite into Henry's arm, tearing the flesh away like a wild animal. Chase followed, gnawing at his leg, and Owen sank his teeth into Henry's shoulder. Pain engulfed him as his former friends devoured him alive, piece by piece, As the last shred of life left Henry's body, the original mangled human deer man tilted its head, watching intently, as though this was nothing more than a twisted ritual. The lie had manifested into a nightmare far worse than anything Henry could have imagined. The boy who loved to tell stories had become the final chapter in his own tale of horror. In the end, there was nothing left of Henry but blood-stained earth and the echo of his own lies carried on the wind.